KMPH. Let's see.
All good here.
Good, good.
Streaming live, so no mistakes.
I want to thank everyone for coming out today to this news conference. And it was an impromptu news conference based on a Facebook posting. There was partial video that was released on Facebook, which was brought to my attention last night regarding an officer who was striking a suspect multiple times in the wrist. I knew that this, after watching the video, that there was tremendous potential for this video to go viral, as we've seen other videos go viral that have that show an officer using force. And I know that this video, just shown as it was on Facebook, again has that potential to create misperceptions amongst viewers and to question or criticize the actions of the officers. So today we're going to talk about what led up to the use of force. We're going to show that Facebook posting as well as the entire body-worn camera video from one of the officers on the scene, so that we can clarify what led up to the officer's use of force. Mark.
Can we kill that light, please?
Yes. Lower right, please. Far right. Yes.
There you go, there you go. There, he's got it. Come on, hurry up. Fucking. Come on, Levi. Back up. Okay, good.
So as you can see from the Facebook post, there was 7 strikes that an officer made with his fist to the rib cage area of a suspect who was on the ground. They were attempting to handcuff him. What led up to this call was that on last night, July 3rd, at approximately 7:22 p.m., our department received 2 911 calls regarding an armed disturbance at 1398 East Bulldog Lane. And this location is a sobering center, and there are 4 occupants who live together in this particular sobering center. The actual caller who notified the police was not on scene but was responding and had received secondhand information from the victim of the incident. The information provided to dispatch was that client Roger Ismail, 38 years, 260 pounds, is under the influence of crystal meth or crystal and is holding a knife and threatening other clients. Again, the caller was en route to the location, and we also had received a second 911 call regarding this. I want to play that 911 call at this time.
Call 1. Call on Wednesday, July 3rd, 2019, 7:22 and 19 seconds p.m.
911.
Hi.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, Fresno Police. What's your name?
My name is John Devin, Federal Living Manager for Western. I have a client that appears to be a individual holding a knife.
Okay, are you at the location with him right now?
I'm on my way now. I'm right on the street.
Okay, who called you with it?
Another client.
What apartment number?
It's 1398 Bulldog Lane, number 2.
You like Edward?
You like that, please?
And the client was under the influence, what's his or her name?
His name is Roger Ismail. He is 61, maybe 250. Looks Simone. What's the largest one?
Okay, I'm sorry, Robert,
Roger.
Roger.
Yes.
Okay, last name?
Ismail. Ismael.
Okay, he's 51 years, you said?
No, I think he's 38 years old.
Okay, and what's he under the influence of what?
Crystal meth.
Okay. Is he threatening anyone with a knife?
Yes, he's threatening other things.
How many clients do you have in the home, in the apartment?
And the thing is, there's first others, but there's several others that are on property. There's a total of 56.
So again, the information that was provided to our dispatcher was Roger Ismail was armed with a knife and was threatening clients inside of the Sober Living Center. Officers arrived shortly thereafter, located Ismail walking in the complex from that particular sobering center room. They followed him into a carport area where they made contact with him. One of the officers attempted to detain Ismail and approached him and attempted to search him when Ismail began to resist, the initial resistance, and pulled away from the officer. The officer attempted to handcuff him, and again Ismail pulled away from him. Ismail actively resisted the officers as they were standing. Ultimately, officers took Ismail to the ground, and there was a struggle that ensued. The officers were able to place a handcuff on one of his wrists, but was not able to get the second handcuff on or onto the second wrist because of the level of resistance that was being offered. And it was very apparent that Ismail was extremely strong, perhaps as a result of being under the influence of crystal methamphetamine. As the officers were wrestling with him on the ground, Ismail was able to push himself up onto his knees on all four, and it was at that time that the officers made the decision to back away from him and to utilize a taser. The taser application was applied several times, and it was partially effective in the fact that it caused him to go to the ground, but he continued to refuse the officer's commands to place his hands behind his back, and again the taser application was reapplied at least 2 different times at that point while he was on the ground. And it's important to remember that the officers at this time were under the belief that Ismail was armed with a knife, the same knife which he had threatened a client inside of the sobering center. The officers then reapproached Ismail as he was on the ground, and Ismail continued to physically resist, and they were unable to place the handcuff on his second wrist when a decision was made by one of the sergeants on scene to strike him multiple times with his fist in the rib cage area in order to gain compliance, and that in fact did have the desired effect as they were able to place a handcuff on him. So I want to show you the video of one of the officers, the initial officer that made contact with him, and demonstrate that level of force and perhaps narrate some of it for you. That lower right again, please. This is the initial contact. We don't have sound yet because of the buffer. Again, he's trying to put his hands behind his back so that he can search him to see if he had a knife. As the officer takes the handcuffs on, he tries to get it on his wrist, and in fact is able to at one point, resisting both of the officers. Ultimately, they do take it to the ground, and this is where sound comes in.
Put your hands behind your back. Get down. Hey, back off. Get on the ground or you're going to get tased. Get on the ground or you're going to get tased.
That's when the suspect approached the officer.
Not responding to his applications.
Hey, what is that? Oh, don't move!
Hey,
Don't move! Stay down!
keep him on.
Stay down!
Keep him on.
Stay down!
Put your hands behind your back now. Put your hands behind your back.
Officers believed he
Put
was
your hands behind your back
reaching in
now.
here for perhaps a knife in his waist.
Put your hands. Do it again. Put your hands behind your back. Choose to listen. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Okay. Come on. Put your hands behind your back now. He's pretty strong, dude.
So when the officers approached, there's 3 officers on scene at this time.
Hey! I'm alright, but we're out front of the police department. Put your hand behind your back. Stop resisting! Put your hand behind your back. Stop resisting! Use your hand. Okay, put your hand. Oh crap.
At this point that the officer locates his ribcage and starts to put the strikes.
Put your hand behind your back. Put your hand behind your back. Put your hand behind your back. Hey, Chad, I'm trying to get that shot. Get that leg. I got the arm. I got the arm. Got it. He's on. Handcuffs are on. Security here. Yeah. 407 to 406.
So you can see that there was quite a struggle on the ground. That was not shown on the Facebook post. What was shown on the Facebook post was a brief portion of that struggle and the body strikes, and I mean a brief portion. Wanted to show it in its entirety so that individuals could then see it. We're going to make that post on our Facebook so that people can not only see the original Facebook posting, but what happened in its entirety as well. Ismail was transported to the hospital by ambulance for the purpose of being looked at by a doctor, which is protocol once a taser application is used. While at the hospital, a citation was issued to Ismail for his arrest for being under the influence of methamphetamine as well as resisting arrest. There's a follow-up investigation being conducted by our detectives regarding the other charges, potential charges. That would include when he brandished a kitchen knife, which we had learned from one of the clients that he had actually brandished a large kitchen knife and then made the comment that if they did not get the F out of there, that he would kill them. And so that was the information that our officers had at the time. Roger Willie Ismail does have a history of drug abuse, substance abuse. He also has a violent criminal history with a prior conviction of assault with a deadly weapon. This time I'll open up to any questions you might have. Any questions?
Are you guys gonna have that body cam video up?
This body cam video will be placed on Facebook, our Facebook account, so that people can see it in its entirety. We'll also provide somewhat of a narrative that led up in terms of what caused officers to be at the call in the first place.
Is this one of the benefits you see of having officers wear a body cam?
I certainly believe that this is a benefit of officers having body-worn camera. Absent this body-worn camera video, people would not have been able to see the level of resistance that was offered up by the suspect, the efforts to try to get him to comply, the use of the taser, the constant struggle that was on the ground that led up to the fist strikes to the rib area. In fact, that Facebook posting only showed the 7 strikes to the rib cage by the officer and did not show all of the other resistance that led up to it and the restraint, quite frankly, on the part of an officer when a suspect has one handcuff on a wrist, and that handcuff can then be used as a weapon if you don't contain that arm. These were not small officers. One of the officers was about 6'2", 220 pounds. The other officer was about 6'5", and somewhere around 250 pounds. So the suspect in this case was exercising extreme strength, more than likely because he was under the influence of methamphetamine, crystal meth, and that's what allowed him to resist to the degree that he did. I also know this, that there's always a risk when you show body-worn camera video on a case like this, because force in and of itself and what an officer does out there is never pretty. The use of force by officers as in order to overcome resistance is not something that the general public sees. In fact, sometimes it would be shocking to a person to see this. But I thought that it was important, based on that partial posting on Facebook, to release this video, to release the 911 call, so that people can then see it in its entirety and make their own judgment without facing the potential of this video going viral, the Facebook video, and our department receiving criticism on the part of folks seeing it, not just here, but perhaps across the country.
So it's hard to replicate real world interactions. Is that kind of in training? Do they learn different techniques as to how to kind of subdue a subject in this manner?
Officers receive a great deal of training in terms of de-escalation, getting individuals to calm down, to gain their compliance voluntarily, what levels of force to use that would overcome that resistance. And I think all of those things, the training that was provided to officers was shown here in this body-worn camera video. And it's unfortunate that when people are under the influence of crystal methamphetamine, they're not able to make good judgments. They have incredible superhuman strength when officers are attempting to detain them. And it's very difficult for officers to overcome that resistance. As you saw, even with the use of the application, although it was the taser was partially effective in the fact that the guy was on the ground, but he still would not put his hands behind his back, and the officers were very concerned about him still being armed with that knife, and perhaps that it was in his waistband underneath a jacket.
Because it was a knife, I noticed that the officers went in there. They didn't go in there with guns drawn. They had tasers.
Yeah, the officers, even though they knew that this individual was armed with a knife, I believe showed great restraint. They tried to use the force, a lower level of force in terms of the taser versus utilizing a handgun. Although at one point, I do believe one of the officers felt that this suspect had turned with a knife, but it was actually the handcuff that was on his wrist. So great restraint. I believe that this video clearly shows the level of resistance being offered by the suspect and why the level of force had to be used by the officers to overcome that resistance.
How are the officers? Are there any injuries to the officers?
Fortunately, there were no injuries. I think one of the officers injured his hand slightly during this struggle. But these officers that were involved in this call were, again, large in size as well and strong. But fortunately, no one was injured, not even the suspect. The suspect was not even injured. In fact, he made a comment, I believe, while he was at the hospital about how those body strikes had no effect on him. Said that the officer hit like a girl. That was his words, not ours. And so, having said that, I'm very fortunate this was the outcome. No one got injured.
So are they still out on the street, the officers, or they probation? How does that work?
These are veteran officers. In fact, two of the officers were actually sergeants who were on scene. There was another officer, but these are veteran officers that have been in law enforcement for the better part of 15 years or more. So,
but are they still working now, or are they?
Yes, the officers the officers will return to duty this evening, just as they normally would, and we will have this investigation looked into more completely. But again, on the surface, based on what you see in this video, you can see that the officers did what they needed to do in order to detain a person who had been threatening someone with a knife. They attempted to search that individual. He pulled away. They attempted to handcuff him, and ultimately ended up having to fight with the suspect on the ground multiple times in order to to be able to handcuff him and make the arrest.
So that procedure, finding the ribcage and striking, is that taught to officers?
The body strikes?
Yeah.
Well, whenever you're trying to overcome active resistance, there's a number of tools that are available to an officer. An officer can certainly use OC spray, which sometimes does not have the right effect because it ultimately ends up impacting officers. They can utilize a taser, which they did. There was multiple applications on the part of the officers with the taser. And when that doesn't gain the necessary compliance and they're fighting with an individual on the ground, body strikes are an effective tool. However, they do give the appearance of being overly aggressive. And that's a balance those officers have to achieve. But the longer a fight or struggle goes on, the more likely people are to get injured, including the suspect. And so having those body strikes gain the desired effect, and the fact that immediately thereafter he placed his hand behind his back and they were able to handcuff him, or at least it weakened his hand to get behind him. So it is an effective tool. It's just when it's seen on video, it does not always give a good appearance.
Was the knife still on this person?
No, the knives were located back at the location in the house. There were two knives actually. One of them was a 12-inch kitchen knife, and then there was a second knife that was slightly smaller. So evidently after the threat was made and the victim walked away, the suspect had left the knives there. Alrighty, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll have the